Hello my friends, I'm Rick and this is See the Table, and we are looking at Cycle 17 Expanded. This would be our foray into dealing with the primitive Air Force that may or may not be attempting to commit suicide against my scout ship as it leaves the swamp planet Kepit's Folly. Right, and so we run into a few interesting things. This is something that happens every now and then. If you think creating your favorite game system was easy for those people, good for you. That means they did a damn good job making the game very player friendly, right? But that being said, there are so many little details that you kind of miss. You know, obviously, the bigger the project, the more eyes on the project, the better off it is, the less likely you're going to see that. So in my case, I tried to cover as many contingencies as I could possibly imagine, and I can imagine quite a few. One of them apparently was I created aircraft schematics for fixed-wing craft of that era, so 1920, 1930s industrial age era. Right? Technically speaking, you can make an argument that it goes back to 1900. It's a matter of, you know, how you want to portray it, because dirigibles, you know, aircraft can come in many forms, and they don't have to be prop-driven planes. So anyway, I have the tech blueprints for the machines. What I didn't have is the weapons to go on them, which is kind of a, like I said, it's one of those scenarios where if you're not involved in this, it hadn't come up at any time during at that moment, so we'll have to make a few adjustments to this. One of the things we're looking at though is we look at primitive airplanes and things like this. We're going to get the equipment guide out, and another thing that kind of occurred to me that I might need to make an adjustment on is that the hard points that these fixed planes carry is not sufficient for what they ought to carry. I was trying to limit the amount of lethality the lower tech stuff could go. So what we're looking at here is the Juan Curro is my scout ship that's been busy over at Kepit's Folly, and it is now extraditing itself to return to the planet, to the capital, and get resupplied or whatever. And in the process of doing so keep in mind, I've already moved this tag ship over to the capital. So if I engage in combat and for some asinine reason the locals actually get lucky and damage the ship, I have to adjust for that. Or if it gets delayed or it gets brought down by even unluckiest chance, I have to adjust for that. So, you know, I would have to backtrack the tag back to where it was just for shits and giggles. One of the things I had said previous video is my gun mounts, so the Scout has no capital ships whatsoever. It has a single Tech 1 shield generator. So its shields are pretty marginal compared to naval grade weapons. They're really pointless against most naval grade weapons. Now against ground based weapons, small craft scale versus naval scale, that's a different animal, and it'll hold up for a little while. But they're not everything they could be, and they can fail. The two gun mounts that my Scout does mount each has 4 rocket pods. These are Tech 1 rocket pods. They have a short range. They fire 10 rockets in a round, and they have 100 reloads. So you'd have 10 shots of 10 per weapon to fire. They have an attack modifier of plus 8%, and they do a damage of 2 and per rocket hit. So potentially 20 points of damage. That's quite significant against, you know, something. So for example, my Tech 1 shield, if it only produces 20 points of shield protection, a straight barrage hit from a damn rocket pod could bring my shield down. I'm not likely to say it would, but it could. So when we look at the blueprint section which is listed up here, I got added in this doohickey right here. All right. We're looking at primitive fixed wing. Fixed-wing atmospheric small craft being found on many worlds throughout subtle space. Many come from lower tech worlds and serve as light reconnaissance and scouting units or strikers. Most are poorly armed and lightly armored. So when I looked at the initial -2 tech, so tech level 2 or tech -2 aircraft, the PFW-5 is a 5-ton unit, 5-ton aircraft. Would cost the equivalent of half a credit. It takes one pilot. It has no computer and communication system installed in it. It carries a half a ton of ammo for whatever weapon it would carry. It has originally had one hard point, and I got thinking about that. That makes no sense. So I was thinking the really old biplane, so potentially one machine gun. So ideally, it could have two. I think I made a note here to modify it to two, to have two hard points. The downside with having multiple hard points is it allows them to mount heavier weapons. So you can have a single weapon that does a massive amount of damage, but it takes 4 mounts to hold it on the craft. So in this case, this is their version, and it has. The plane itself has 2 hit points, for the equivalent of 2 hit points. So this would be 20 hit points against. It wouldn't take much to knock this plane down. That's kind of where I'm going with it. And it has a damage reduction of 0.1. So we're back to a very tiny percentage. This thing takes pretty much any kind of damage. It's in trouble. And it has one armor point. So you have to overcome the damage. Damage reduction reduces the damage, and you overcome the armor point to inflict damage. But it's not a lot. And we have a speed of 380 kph that gives us 38 hexes per combat round. Has a ceiling of 1,000 meters, or about 3,000 feet. It has no built-in shields, no ECM system. It uses chemical fuel, and it uses 0.1 ton of chemical fuel per cycle or per use. So that's something that when you talk about logistics, if I had a squadron of these things, there are 5 of them, and they're using 0.5 tons of chemical fuel every time I fly them, and if I use them in 6 missions on a 10-day cycle, then I've just used up 3 tons of fuel. So you gotta track stuff like that. And once again, we go back to why would you want primitive aircraft if you're a space-based, space-going, star-spanning, whatever? It's about utilizing the resources you have. Like I said, these crude planes potentially could become a luxury item as people see them as recreational vehicles and stuff on your more advanced worlds. Another possibility is if they're durable, then you could equip them with far higher tech weapons and add-on technical systems and stuff that would give them some more survivability and more impact. Plus there's they may be slow and they may be fragile, but they could be used for training purposes. I mean, scouting purposes. Right when you're first starting out and your military is weak as a kitten, you need every advantage you could get. So as a house, if I could get a squadron of these things up and flying, it would behoove me to do so. And then let's take it to another kind of sidestep into the rabbit hole. In this case, if I at some point I choose to officially acknowledge Kepit's Folly as my property or my house lord's responsibility, however you want to look at it, and all those fine people living there now become members of the crown or subjects of the crown. Well, there's some obligations my house has to provide to legitimize them claims in the eyes of the Imperium. One of them would be to protect and defend the population from outside threats, and sometimes internal threats. So potentially utilizing their military sources that I can recruit from them to help deal with their problems, it'd be a lot easier and cheaper than me trying to build an entire army to occupy a planet of tens of millions of people. And that includes using their aircraft whenever possible. So I could then just up armor them using my technology. It would be superior than anything the locals can produce if they get froggy. I mean, you use your imagination however you want to look at it. So that's kind of how that's going to play down that road. And then we got to go and look at what the hell are they armed with. right? So where here somewhere, way up front, yeah, way up front. Okay. So like I said, if you look at things like long arms, pistols, I have Renaissance age muskets, steam age muskets, industrial age rifles, atomic age rifles, information age rifles, ballistic rifles. So I mean, my tech level for personal weapons goes all the way down to, in this case, for rifles, a -4, and if it goes down to like a freaking club, you go down to a -11 on some of the melee weapons, because that's that's how I progressed them in my mind. But when I went to do support weapons and things for combat or for vehicles and stuff, I kind of fell short a little bit. So when I'm looking at this case, small craft weapon scale, heavy infantry support weapons. So if you think about a 50 caliber machine gun, you can in theory mount that on an aircraft, because they do it now. They still do it now. They do it all the time. So the idea being is some infantry-based size scale weaponry will work on a vehicle grade thing. And so when we look at putting a heavy machine gun on a tank and the cannon on the tank, we have two grades of weapons. We have an anti-infantry weapon, in all theory. That's what the machine gun's for. So that is an infantry scale weapon gauged for infantry. And now you can use it against combat units, you can use it against a lot of vehicles and quite effectively, but if you use it against armored vehicles, its effectiveness is not quite as pronounced as it would be for dealing with non-armored shit and people. Whereas opposed to the tank itself having a cannon, the cannon's main purpose, being a vehicle grade weapon, is to kill another vehicle, and does poorly at targeting infantry. So the idea being is you're going to take your 20 or 200 millimeter cannon and point it at, or 20 millimeter cannon and point it at a couple of guys running across the field. That's kind of a waste of ammo. I mean, you can do it and people do it, but anyway. So what I have to make some adjustments is, so like for example, biplanes often had more than one machine gun, one or two, was two being the most common, sometimes one forward and somebody in the back shooting one in the reverse, or two side by side kind of stuff. So that's what made me readjust my thought process on the fixed wing having two hard points opposed to one. So having two makes more sense, because now in this case we could put a pair of light machine guns, and because my tech machine guns, everything, let's just say, we'll look at light machine gun for an example. It stops at Tech 1, and that's a mistake. Oh, and there is a Tech 0. I stand corrected. So, the range doesn't change, although an argument can be made that it could. The ammo, the rate of fire and the ammo capability of the device doesn't change. What the two main things that change, or three main things, is the TAC modifier, the damage per hit adjustment, and the cost. So if I look it down and I walk them all down, everything here is based in increments of 2. And so a Tech 0 would have a +6 to hit. A -1 would have a +4 to hit. A -2 would have a +2 modifier to hit. And its damage per hit probably going to be 50% of what's listed here, because that's how this rolls down. It's 50% in increments, so that would go down a hair, and your cost is going to be reduced. So an industrial age primitive light machine gun, circa 1920s, 1930s kind of machine gun, is going to cost an Imperium credits 0.02 credits per unit, and that would be how we would do it. We just literally take the stats we have and we back them down just a hair, because that's how we went up when I looked at increments of changing based on the more advanced tech levels of the items we were talking about. So we would make some minor changes on that, and then what I ended up with is the Kepit Folly's primitive fixed wing aircraft, a squadron, and according to my squadron rules, could be between 3 and 6 craft. And so in this case, I think 3 is sufficient 3 makes sense, half a squadron or part of a wing. I mean, it's just how it didn't, how I'm going to balance it out. And I got all my stats for it. And then I've added the light machine guns here that's been modified for the era. And then down here I have one Kuro and its 2 gun mounts, 4 rocket pods. And then we have an issue with movement. And I'm about fit to be tied, about to tear my freaking hair out the other night, trying to remember what the hell. Someplace, somewhere in this stuff, I have a conversion chart that allows you to take space and atmospheric movements and figure them out. So in theory, the single banks of sublight drives that are powering my Scout, the one Kuro, is at the minimum amount. So its actual atmospheric movement in the atmosphere is quite slow. It's not much faster than these primitive fighter planes. And best I could figure, trying to understand the bastardized rule set that kind of was attached to them, which I had to make notes to clarify this a hell of a lot more, because I know damn well there's a conversion chart someplace. I just don't know where the hell it is. I just couldn't find it without spending the whole night going page by page and recognizing what I'm looking at. See, that's another challenge. When you're writing stuff for other people, you're creating material that you want other people to share, you have to work on the understanding that you can't be there to explain anything to them. So they need to be able to work out whatever it is you're trying to do. And if you create something and you can't work it out, you need to rethink what it is you're doing here. And I ran into that in this scenario, which is a good thing, because it's through these kind of playtesting things that we figure this crap out. And we'd much figure it out now than to have a even one more broken problem in a set of a very complicated rule system. If you think this shit was easy, y'all nuts. This stuff, I ain't Josh when I said it was a progression of frustration and love over a 10-year period. It's just, like I said, I got over here, I'm looking at the earlier versions of this, and sometimes that's what I see, that's what I have to do, is now, if I can't find that conversion chart in this version, the next step would be go to that version and go back through all that crap, which is much worse on this one, and try to find that set of parameters, because I know I addressed it at some point. I know it's there, I just don't know what it is. So my gunship, or my Scout, has 2 sets of rocket pods, and I established that they are port and starboard. So this gives one on each side. In this case, it means there's 360 degree, this way. And then you have about 180 degree sweep this way, maybe 270 depending. At some point though, the weapons can't cross and shoot through the ship. And so you have arcs of fire, and you want those weapons to be able to hit as most often. So in this case, if the fighters split, a pair goes one around one side, the other goes the other side. My 2 gun mounts are then targeting 2 separate sets of targets. They're not concentrating fire. And the other downside I have is the fact that they are rocket pods and they're dumb. That's why the range is so short in compared to things like missiles. Like Battletech, like a lot of tabletop war games, being realistic with range is very hard. If you really wanted to make the argument, you should have ranges of tens of thousands of miles when you're dealing with space combat. You should be able to shoot things and have to track dozens of missiles as they take their time to cross that distance of space, etc., etc. The battles aren't quite as nice and nifty as they look on TV, because it just doesn't, mechanics don't function that way in space. And so in this case, the ship's working its way upwards as well, so it's gaining atmosphere. It only has to get above that 3,000 foot window. Once it exceeds 3,000 foot, the local fighters can't chase it any further. The downside is the local fighters' primitive light machine guns have much further range. So if they can stay within range of my ship, they can keep firing at it to try to bring it down. And there's slim chance of these light machine guns, even if they all hit repeatedly, bringing the shields down and breaching the armor before the ship gets out of range. That's not likely to happen. But it could happen because there's always a 1% of a percent in most of these rule sets that allow for a catastrophic dumb luck hit. Because we kind of want that stuff. You kind of want that F kind of thing in a game system. So anyway, we now will have the little fighters. We'll have 3 of them, armed with 6 light machine guns between them, versus 8 rocket pods in a ship that's 10 times their size. Plus, technically speaking, if you really wanted to get into the nitty gritty, I could create little stat blocks for the pilots, for the primitive pilots, and make them roll a fear check to see if they'll even go after my ship. Because this is something they don't know what the hell it is, right? It just is what it is. So I think here, maybe in a week or 2, I will probably try to do a simulated combat scenario between the 2 ships, the little flight of ships, and the one Curl. Before I do that, I want to check my my measurements for speed, because I had to calculate this stuff. It says basically at the end of the day, the movement is matched. When I compared the ship movement versus what a single battery of sublight drives should push a loaded ship in atmosphere, it comes out to be pretty damn close. And so we're looking at 1 hex per combat round. So both the fighters and the shuttle, my scout, are moving at the exact same speed. So at the end of the day, it's just a matter figuring how many hexes, or how many combat rounds it'll take for for the ship to reach that 3,000 meter ceiling, so we can get past the fighter's range. And until then, we just take damage, or we get feisty and we decide to engage the local fighters head on in a dogfight. And the way I do that is I'll look at the Yon Kirill's captain, and I'll make a roll for an NPC interaction roll to see what the damn captain chooses to do. Because maybe the captain wants to fight. Maybe the captain wants to run away. We won't know until we make that check. Anyhow, I'm Rick. You're not. Till next time, we are into the first week of December. And that's always nice, because we know holidays are coming again. We're getting closer all the time. This past week, gripe checks of, you don't want to hear it, get the kick rocks, right? Man, I don't know why I thought my check for yesterday was going to be for 42 hours. In my head, it was 42 hours all the damn week last week. And it only turned out to be 32 hours. So I was off by 10, and that's a huge, it was rough. We had to forego paying our van payment. That'll have to happen next week, which means I have to double up. I have both a furnace payment and the van payment next week. That's $300 plus. The wife got paid. She gets her disability on the 3rd of the month. So we went and got our mortgage for the house. Our mortgage went down $20 so for this year, which was a surprise. We also got approved for heating assistance, because we don't make that much. Between the 2 of us, we make about 50 grand a year, and that used to be a lot of money, but it's just I don't know. I keep robbing Paul of a heater right now. It's just bugging me. It bugs me to no end, and so. And not paying all the bills each week that I need to pay, because when you have to hold back a week to do it, it just makes the next week worse. So I've looked at 53 hours for sure on this check for next Friday, because I put in a lot of hours. I was out Friday night. I had a single sushi place that same strip mall where the Pancheros were. I'm out 11-12 hours doing theirs. This place is at the other end of the strip mall, and theirs is half the size, so it takes 2 trips, partial sometimes. So about 5-6 hours out there doing that job, and I got home about 3 o'clock in the morning, which is better than coming home at 7 in the morning. You know, makes sure at least made for yesterday a decent day. The wife and I, we went out and did a little shopping. Uh, um, my company pays for my boots, for work shoes and stuff, and my current set were wore out. I was out the other day when we getting that sleet and stuff, and I could feel the water coming into my, soaking my socks. And I looked at the bottoms, and sure enough, got a hole wore through it. So it was time for another pair. So the company paid for that. Used an excuse to go, and we went to Fleet Farm. It's hard to find. I wear a size 14 triple E. It's hard finding the width. I have such a wide foot. It's always pissed people off. So when I can find shit my size, I grab it because it's so hard to find. That's why I told the boss lady in the office. I says if I can see it and I know I'm needing one, I'm buying it. So in this case, I definitely need it. And then we went out and got something to eat, and went to basically a fast food place, spent $20 there, and then can't afford to go to a regular restaurant. I think last Christmas we went to Applebee's and came out, spent $90. I thought we were going to croak. I mean, really, we really, it's just hard to do that. So we went out and looked at some Christmas lights and stuff, drove around a little bit. It was a good evening. It was a quiet evening and a good evening. That's always great. And next week, the next Monday or Tuesday, the company's having its company Christmas party of sorts. And the boss lady gives out our little bonus. She's gonna give her little bonuses out at the end of it. She said this year she gave them cash. Last year I got a cashier's a gift card to Walmart for $200, and she gave my wife one for $50. So between us we had $250, which basically allowed us to get everything we needed for the Christmas New Year holiday paid for. This year I told the wife, I said, my chair that I sit in out there is broken. It's 5 years old and it's fine. It's just, I'm heavy and it's beat up. The chair's falling. It's just it's given up. The back's not, I've got bungee cords trying to hold it together, and I think part of my aches and pains in my sides for the past couple months is from that crappy chair. I really should take this chair out there because I can, but I don't want to. I'd rather have a higher back on it. So anyway, I told her, I says, we're going to take some of that $200 and go see if I can find another chair to replace mine, because her chair's not too far behind it. We bought them brand new as a set when we bought the house, and that was 5 years, a lot of mileage out of them. For a couple of heavy set people, chairs are rated for probably 50 pounds less than what we put in them. Is what it is. Anyway, hope y'all have a great holiday weekend. It's coming up. I hope things are going great. I mean, the world's a screwed up place. There's nothing we can do that we can say. Do the best we can. Anyhow, till next time. I'm Rick. You're not. Missy over here in the corner. It just irritates me to no end.